Schizophrenics of Reddit, what is the scariest hallucination that you have ever experienced? Not me, but I once was in the situation to sit around at court since I was assigned to a judge during law school. The accused was a schizophrenic guy that seemed perfectly normal during the trial because he was on his meds, but a few months earlier he stopped taking them and killed his girlfriend. Right before going to bed, they were laying on the bed and she was playing with her phone while he hallucinated. She didn't know it, but he later described that he'd seen a light jumping back and forth on her and hearing the voice of his father, who was sleeping upstairs. The father told him to kill his girlfriend because she was a demon, and if he didn't, then she would kill him. So then his girlfriend goes to playfully reach out for his hair and he snaps, grabs her by the neck, threw her right off the bed, got on top of her and choked her, kicked against her chest a few times and still was not finished, although the court medic said she was brain dead by then. His father told him to stab her, so he got up, went to the kitchen and got a kitchen knife. He stabbed her so deep the tip of the knife hit the ground underneath her and got stuck. The scene was terrible, as you can imagine, but all he could feel was pride and relief because in his mind he just killed the very demon that was about to kill him. When he got out of his room, his real father came downstairs and he said to his father, "She stopped breathing." The father was confused and shocked, and when the police arrived, he was sitting at the kitchen table, bewildered because his father wasn't proud of him, although he had done what he wanted him to do. That poor man didn't understand he had killed his girlfriend of 3 years. Apparently he had heard different voices the previous weeks, but none of them were of ill intent. When he got lost, they reminded him of the way or gave advice and so on. It was that night things took a turn, and as said by the court medic, this is a typical development of things, although most schizophrenics hurt themselves instead of others. From a young age, around 12, I started seeing a man. At first it was hide and seek. He was always just around the corner, or just able to hide so I couldn't find him. One day before school, I see him across the street walking into the woods. I decided to see if I could follow him and ran out the front door, saying I forgot about a book report. I crossed the street and can see him walking up this old path that we used to bike down. It was heavily wooded, but I can see him up ahead. I follow him to a clearing, and just before the clearing is heavy brush. I lose sight of him for the first time as he climbs through it. I crawl after him, but he's gone. I tried to look around and called out a few times, but I couldn't find him. I was pretty far away from school, so I decided to head that way. On the way there is an old bridge, and as I get about halfway, I hear a voice say, "Jump or I'll push you." I felt an electric shock pulse through my spine, and I turned around screaming, "What do you want?" The man looked at me and said, "You'll never know." Then he just disappeared, and I stopped seeing him after that. I've had a reoccurring figure since my episodes first started. When I was younger, I would hear brief whispered statements like "hey" or "look." The first time this specific voice turned into a visual sensation, I was around 13 years old. I was reading in bed, and I heard a whisper saying, "Stop," that kept repeating louder and louder to the point of screaming. Slowly coming into my field of vision was a woman in a white robe, a disfigured, bloody old face and mangled hair. When she was fully there, the screaming stopped. It felt like an eternity of being unable to look away because I was petrified. My eyes just kept watering. After a few minutes, I was able to snap out of the trance and she was gone. I've struggled with other episodes, but this is one of my few reoccurring terrors. In school, she would appear in class, I'd be out with my friends, and she'd be in the road, I'd be at work, and she's just there. It's caused issues in relationships because I have a hard time admitting I go through with this. A month ago, I was visiting my ex-girlfriend at her dorm, and I woke up paralyzed with fear because I was experiencing an episode but couldn't reach out for help. Sometimes I worry that I'll have to deal with this alone until I can't handle the dread anymore. Somebody I knew back in high school had schizophrenia but was taking medication for it. She accidentally skipped a dose once and she came to school hysterical that she didn't want to go back home because she heard someone chewing human meat under her bed. Human meat. How does one even know what that sounds like? A user replied, "The same way you just know things in dreams, in ways that don't make sense in the waking world. You mistake schizophrenia for being like reality. In reality, you'd hear a noise, then recognize what it is or figure out what it is. In schizophrenia, hallucinations are spontaneous knowledge that come all at once. You know what you are hearing and its implication. It's not like you hear a knock and use deductive reasoning to figure out it's a person buried between your walls. You simply know that there is a dead person in the walls knocking on them, trying to come out. I've had schizophrenia as long as I can remember, and because of that, I grew up thinking that it was normal to see things every once in a while. So I've never made a big deal out of it. It's almost always really tall figures standing there staring at me. Used to scare the shit out of me when I was a kid, but then I learned I could make them disappear if I focused hard enough. Until one time when they didn't disappear. I was 20 years old, living alone in an apartment, and I wake up to find that the TV is now off, even though I fell asleep with it on. I roll over and realize I'm completely surrounded by these figures. Most of them are probably 8 feet tall, and there are at least a dozen of them standing over my bed and all around the room. Way more than I've ever seen at once. I couldn't make out exactly what they looked like, but they had weirdly tall heads. It gave me a shock at first, but then I remember to close my eyes and focus until they disappear. I open my eyes again, and they're still there. And they're moving all around now, which my hallucinations don't normally do. So I start freaking out now, and I try making them disappear a couple more times, which still doesn't work. Just before I start screaming, their bodies seem to melt into the walls, and they're gone. The most disturbing part to me, until this day, is that my TV had been turned off. Everything else I can brush off as just seeing things, but I know for certain that the TV really was off. I realize there are lots of logical explanations for it, but it still makes me wonder if there really was someone or something there. The scariest hallucination I had was of snipers surrounding my house at night. One Friday evening, I was watching TV and happened to be playing with a flashlight that I'd left on the coffee table. Boom! Next thing you know, I'm in a full-blown hallucination. I heard a special forces team out the window as they were sneaking out of my backyard. I flashed the light around the room and they got quiet and they misunderstood my intent. They thought the light was mounted on a rifle. Next thing you know, they're calling me outside as part of a SWAT response, and I'm on my hands and knees on my porch in the dead of night asking them to please not shoot me. I must have stayed out there about 2 hours with my hands locked behind my head as the snipers got more and more nervous about what I might do. Eventually they decided that there was no way to defuse the situation and they shot me. I spent about 5 minutes laying dead on my front porch, then crawled inside my house to die. I phoned my mum to let her know that I'd been shot and that special forces had killed me. Needless to say, she wasn't buying it and talked me down to earth a little bit. But that wasn't the end of it. She had me go to the ER and stayed with me on the phone until I got there. I'm still in full-blown hallucination mode, so while I'm waiting in the ER, I hear the leader of the Special Forces unit chatting with the front desk nurse. He knows that I'm there and is coming to get me. Luckily, the doctor found me first and didn't really know what to do with me, so he gave me 2 milligrams of Ativan and discharged me. I have been treated for schizoaffective disorder for most of my life, with a presented family history. I take an antipsychotic and a mood stabilizer multiple times daily. I live in a sleepy town and in a particularly close subsection of the town where everyone knows everyone. I woke up one morning and felt quite fine, drank my morning coffee and walked to the door to let my cat out. As I closed the door, I saw a rather large man with no shirt on run full speed into my neighbor's backyard, and he disappeared behind my neighbor's house. Obviously, this set off a panic in me. Why was he running? What's he doing in Brad's backyard at 7 a.m. half naked? The problem with delusions and hallucinations is that during one, you are so sure they are real, there's no doubt in your mind, and thus no matter how outlandish the idea of some random person trespassing with no shirt on seems to you. I now at the time was hell-bent and determined to find out who this guy was. The police arrested me in Brad's backyard, screaming and ranting in boxers and a bathrobe that a man that doesn't exist was there doing exactly what I was now doing. I know you were probably hoping for horror stories or tales of imagining ghosts or dragons, but real horror is seeing your entire town watch you get carried away as a loonial when you thought you were helping the community. I'm not personally schizophrenic, but my girlfriend was diagnosed paranoid schizophrenic at a young age. She's also been diagnosed with psychosis by somebody else, so they're kind of back and forth on her what she falls under. She hears stuff all the time, but it's the visual stuff that really affects her, but it's also far less common. The first time I experienced her seeing one of her visions really shook me up. Me and her were lying in bed, and she suddenly sits up, quite startled, and asks me if I can see that. I ask her what she can see, and she tells me there's a hand on the foot of the bed. Long, bony, it's just reached out from under the bed and placed its hand on the bed. I try to reassure her that there's nothing there, but she can't take her eyes off it. Then she really starts freaking out, screaming, trying to get away, covering her ears and panicking. It takes me ages to calm her down. Later, she tells me that the hand belonged to a creature, some horror movie looking thing with long, bony limbs, and it had pulled itself up and started climbing on the bed towards her. She was screaming, curled up in a ball as this creature from a horror film was climbing up the bed towards her. It really hit me then. There's nothing worse, and I know I'd never be able to cope if I was her. I don't know how she does it. I really don't. Could you imagine being completely fine, sat in a bed, chatting, and then this distorted figure pulls itself out from under your bed and comes for you? No diagnosis here, but I've been suffering from constant delusions, paranoia, and hallucinations for the past 2 years. The scariest hallucination I've ever had took place in a Target. I was in the canned food aisle when I saw a little girl grab a can. There was nothing particularly unusual about it. I, at first, figured it was just a girl getting something off the shelf for her mum. But then, after a while of standing with the can in her hands in silence, she turned around and stared at me with her empty eye sockets. She opened the can and started chasing me around the store with the can top. They're really sharp. And I started running through the store to escape. I know it's stupid, but it felt really real. Anyway, I ended up tripping, and the next thing I knew, she handed me the can top and was controlling my arms. I felt myself cut my neck and wrists open and was basically screaming. But then I knocked myself out of it. When I came to, I was just standing there staring at the cans with tears streaming down my face. It's the most vivid hallucination I've ever had, and much scarier than the ones I have every day. I don't have schizophrenia, but I have experienced some really scary hallucinations before. I do have bipolar disorder, and when I used to drink too much, I would hear weird voices/noises at night while I was trying to go to sleep. When I closed my eyes, a very disturbing slideshow started to play in my head of different images of people with burnt faces, monsters, people with grotesque and inhuman facial features/expressions, etc. After I stopped drinking, I tried smoking weed. Turns out that was a terrible idea. I became extremely paranoid, and one night I heard a noise in my house that made me convinced an intruder was inside. I calmly told myself that wasn't true, but I was still scared out of my mind. When I tried to go to sleep, I started hearing this loud screeching/squeaking noise coming from the corner of my room. I also had visual hallucinations. I have a poster of Jimi Hendrix in my room, and I hallucinated that he was morphing out of the poster and coming into real life. Before you guys say the weed was bad, it was medical that I got from my GF's cousin. So no, it was not dipped in PCP or anything like that. Not super scary, but I've also hallucinated that there was a big black chicken running down the street, and one time woke up to a chorus of women singing the words, "I will double," over and over again. One of the things that makes hallucinations scary is that you don't know what else will happen. My greatest fear was that I would hear someone opening my door or talking to me and telling me to do things. When you have one hallucination, you think, oh my god, what's next? It's like a horror movie that you can't get out of. A few years back, my grandmother was put on antidepressant medication. I won't specifically state the name of what it was, but let's just say she didn't stay on it very long. From what I understand, the first couple days on it, things were fine. She said she felt okay, but hadn't noticed a major change. No other side effects of major reactions had occurred. Things were normal, for lack of a better word. So one day, she takes the meds, everything is the same as it has been the other 2 times. I want to guess a little over an hour after taking the meds, she walks out the back door of her home and heads toward my grandfather's garage, which is located in the backyard. She proceeds about 30 feet down the walkway leading toward the garage and just stops. According to my grandfather, next thing he knows, he hears her let out this ungodly scream and she just falls to the ground shaking. He runs out, my mom and dad hear it and run up there. We live around 300 feet from my grandparents' home. My aunt hears it, my other aunt hears it, my late great-grandmother hears it. What I'm getting at is that the entire neighborhood was inside my grandparents' home within a 10-minute basis trying to figure out what the fuck is going on. Finally, they get my grandmother calmed down and ask what happened. In a nutshell, she explains that she was walking down the concrete pathway and saw something out of the corner of her eye. She says she looks up and sees 5 or 6 men, complete with cowboy attire, sitting on this metal picnic table a few feet away from the well house. Among these men sits, I shit you not, Woody from Toy Story. She says that they're all sitting there talking and laughing with each other, and then all of them suddenly stop, look up at her and just stare. Then she says their faces started melting. Today, she looks back on it and laughs, but it's definitely one of the creepiest things I've ever heard. They promptly called the doctor and she was seen by the next day. Paranoid schizophrenia here. My scary visions are usually in the early morning, but one time at around 2 p.m, I was standing in front of my vanity mirror applying makeup for the day. I started to hear the running of feet. Figuring it was my roommate at the time, I thought nothing of it. It wasn't. All of a sudden, a figure busts in my room. It was about 4 feet tall, no arms, just legs, and was covered head to toe in dark, blood-stained skin. Where its eyes were originally placed was just more skin folds. It ran around my room, making barely audible grunts. If I had to think of a video game enemy that it looked like, I would say the cowman from The Forest. That was my first visual hallucination, and afterwards I locked myself in the bathroom and cried until my husband came home from work. If you guys liked this video, please be sure to drop a like and subscribe, and also check out my TikTok account, Scary Time. That is linked in the description below. And as always, stay scary.